Okay, welcome to Into the Channel, a podcast primarily about women's football, emergency pod edition. Before we hit the pitch, if you enjoy the show or love women's football as much as your boys do, subscribe, follow us YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to watch or listen. Comments, ratings, reviews, always appreciated at ITC_pod on X, at Into the Channel pod on Threads. Into the Channel, presented by just a couple American bros. I am your host, Dino Cespedes, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Grant Engel. What is up, man?
As one half of those American bros, I'm glad to present this podcast because there were some good fucking football games this past week. So good, we had to reconvene a couple days earlier than we expected.
Mm-hmm. Wild few days of football. So wild that just before midnight Friday night, had to send out the bat signal. A couple of fascinating results in the two matchups we're going to talk about right here. In the first one, a matchup that we teased last week on Into the Channel, podcast primarily about women's football. First place Chelsea taking on second place Manchester City, your Sky Blues, in a battle that featured massive WSL implications. I want to clear out here, man. What did you see in this one?
This was a good game, buddy. A lot to enjoy about this game, especially from over here. Maybe my perspective, you could say it's a little skewed, but that's all right. Let me just take a sip here because this game was fucking delicious.
Let's go.
All right. So Chelsea went with a similar strategy that we actually talked about last week when we were talking about their match against Crystal Palace in the FA Cup. And early on, it was a steady diet of Ashley Lawrence flying down the right-hand side and creating chances in the middle of the field for Myra Ramirez and Fran Kirby and whatever other weapon they felt like employing at that moment. I'm going to say, we talked about it last week a little bit when I said, we've enjoyed watching these Champions League games. We've picked our teams that we like. I mean, we love Ajax. We like PSG. Obviously, Bron goes, you already know what time it is with Bron. I'll say it again, man. Watching this match, it really cleared up for me how fucking terrifying it is to root against this Chelsea side, which I think I had kind of lost sight of because watching the Champions League games, I'm not actively rooting against Chelsea. In some cases, I really like a lot of their players and I was rooting for them. But when they're on the other side of your happiness and they are running at goal, that's a pretty scary proposition.
I was watching a little bit of little side note. I was watching a little bit of Essen and Bayern Munich this morning. And, Essen's given them kind of all they can handle in that first half. I'm not sure how it ended. I had to kind of switch off. But it really has given me a new respect for some of these teams, like a Häcken that plays Chelsea tough, shuts them out. And then you see them go against City, and you're just like, oh, shit. So I guess Häcken's just at that level, our guy Camp Hope talked about this, about there being no freebies, no gimmies in this final 8 in Champions League. And I'm just loving the parity. We're coming off a few years where things were a little bit too predictable. And now it's just, wow, anybody could land a big shot and kind of change the complexion of an entire match.
Very well said, my man. You set me up perfectly with the alley-oop there, or a through ball into the channel, if you will. So on landing that big haymaker, landing that big shot, I will say in this City-Chelsea match, we saw a rare occurrence and then a very not rare occurrence right back to back. So first, the nearly unthinkable happens. Into the channel, favorite Aaron Cuthbert has a really loose touch on the ball on Chelsea's defensive side of the center circle. 22-year-old Jessica Park from Manchester City pounces on it, great instincts, immediately is oh, that's free, and runs onto it, starts streaking down the middle of the field. And then the second thing, to follow up that uncommon occurrence of Aaron Cuthbert's poor touch, we have the very common occurrence, something you could almost set your fucking watch to. Jessica Park, she passes the ball very nicely into Khadija Bunny Shaw. Bunny's in one-on-one with the keeper. Hannah Hampton, great keeper for Chelsea. But you already know what time it is. When the pride of the reggae girls is one-on-one with a keeper, she's scoring.
Let's go.
And even better, I mean, the goal is great. Outside of the right foot, sneaks it past Hampton. No shot for Hampton. But then Bunny immediately starts running. They're playing at Chelsea's Park. Just a little, what's that? What's that, everybody? Because she was getting a little bit from the crowd. And that was, everything about that was A+.
The finish was just,
it's great.
Bunny Shaw just doing Bunny Shaw things. My Into the Channel starting 11, number 9, by the way.
Nicely done.
Just an extremely professional finish. I love the ice cold, understated Sully. That's just like, I'm just going to make you feel real bad about where things are going. And just blazing hot start for City. I mean, that was really impressive to see them come out like that. And also kind of see Chelsea not really know what to do about it. I think City did a great job possessing the ball early. A lot of Chelsea's touches and passes were with all 11 City defenders in front of them. So it was a lot of kind of empty possession. Just basically Chelsea trying to get their bearings and figure out, okay, let's collect ourselves because this first 20 minutes has not gone our way. And I think not a situation that we're used to seeing Chelsea in at home as well. So that was very impressive from City. Also want to give a quick shout out. Those all white City kits with the burnt red trim.
Let's go.
Almost as clean as that bunny finish. I mean, they look fucking tip top out there. Those kits.
Yeah. Great shirts. And usually, the sky blues are my favorite. And we have like these all black kits that we wore in years past. But yeah, the white with the red trim, very good look for the squad. And I'm glad you mentioned like the first 20 minutes not going as Chelsea planned. Like I felt like City they were holding the ball. They were, it's exactly what you pointed out. They were pushing Chelsea back. Like Chelsea was not even really getting into, they had a couple runs in there. Obviously, you're not going to completely shut them out. But it felt like I had like that 25 to 30 minute mark until Chelsea was really kind of even able to start getting some offense off. What did you see? Like what did it look like City was doing out there?
I think one, they really missed Canarud early because she's been kind of instant offense when she's on the ball opposite Girl Wrighton. They had Kirby in there who also was looking threatening. She made her presence felt early.
Yep.
I think they weren't really in motion to the level of like giving City problems. I think they kind of made themselves pretty easy to defend.
Yeah.
I think they're just kind of used to, all right, Wrighton on one side, Canarud on the other, Cuthbert in the middle. LJ had a run early, like in the 3rd minute, where I was just like, holy shit.
Yeah.
I made in my notes. I'm like, she might just be the most skilled player in the world that we have, just the stuff that she's able to do. Outside of that, though, I think they just kind of made it easy for City to defend them. And also City's intensity level was all the way maxed, evidenced by, the Park takeaway in the middle of the field, Aaron Cuthbert getting Aaron Cuthberted, and then that clean finish. I just thought they came out super ready and maybe caught Chelsea a little bit off guard early.
I think that's a really good point. And, missing Canarud, I don't think you can overstate that because it's harder to run the press when the other team has Canarud and Wrighton on each side of the pitch. You might be a little more conservative with how high you want to press with those two insanely great passers kind of streaking down the sides. To your point, I think, maybe Chelsea, they were a little easier to defend. I think City's defensive shell held up really well. So I'm just going to, I thought Kirsten Kasperai, Alex Greenwood, Leah Alexandri, I thought they were great in the back line, especially in those wider areas, making sure that, okay, we know that's what Chelsea's going to do. They're going to try to feed balls in from Wrighton. We need to make sure that we're making those as tough as possible. And then I felt like Yui Hasegawa, who is, we've talked about in this podcast since the World Cup, just her as a holding midfielder, she was dropping back. She just knows, okay, I'm needed a little further back this time, and then this other time I'm going to help initiate the offense a little more. She is just such an intuitive player that I think Hasegawa, she's like made in a lab the perfect pivot midfielder to kind of help turn defense into offense, but also just at times be like, I'm mostly playing defense for these next 15 minutes because that's what's required.
Yeah, she was really on it in this match and really just great defending through her positioning. It wasn't that she's like taking the ball away or, getting very physical. She was just always in the mix and always just going to make you really, really work to kind of try to get around her. And she held up super well. I mean, I think without her, it's an absolute different game.
Yeah, that could be the Yui Hasegawa biography title, essentially. I mean, that's just kind of who she is as a player. I totally agree. Let's get into, City is able to kind of hold Chelsea off throughout the rest of the first half. Fran Kirby did have a shot that she just drilled around just before the 30-minute mark.
Mm-hmm.
Kira Keating, I have a feeling we'll be talking about her more as this match progresses. She stepped up. She made the save. And you noted a few weeks ago from watching her, speaking of Frank Kirby, I feel like Kirby is rounding into pretty great form.
Oh, yeah.
And they're going to need it. Like when we're talking about some of the other kind of things that we've seen from Chelsea lately, having a 10 out of 10 Fran Kirby is going to be very important to them, I think, in the Champions League. But going back to Keating, excellent performance from her. I think she had a little bit of a scare. Cuthbert hit a laser from around the 18 later in the first half that went just over the bar that I don't know if Keating was going to get her hands on. The back line and goalkeeping from the FA Cup match against Arsenal to this Chelsea match, looking like a nice strength for City right now.
First of all, shout out to Keating. Talked about her last week. I mean, at her age, she's just playing really, really solid, really confident in goal. I think she kind of gives that City defense a little confidence boost as well. Just kind of knowing she's back there lets them be, a little bit like maybe 10% more aggressive, just knowing that they've got pretty good coverage back there. She's not going to get beat by, you mentioned that Cuthbert shot. Maybe nobody's getting to it, to your point. I think I agree with that. But she's just not going to get beat with something silly. And I think that's kind of what gives them an extra bit of confidence. Alexandra, who you talked about, she was awesome as well. She's just plays end line to end line. She's just like on the field everywhere doing stuff and in the mix all the time. And that Chelsea attack, if I'm not mistaken, I think they were in kind of a 4-4-2 with LJ and Ramirez up top. I'm not sure about that formation. Maybe that was a way to kind of try to go at City a little bit harder. Like I said, I think they really miss Canard and her kind of playmaking, her initiating offense. She's so quick. She's so good on the ball. She's so creative. And Myra Ramirez is so potent offensively that you just kind of got the feeling that if she had 2 more opportunities, 3 more opportunities, she was going to break the seal eventually. And Wrighton wasn't the best Guro Wrighton game.
Yeah.
She was still pretty effective. But yeah, they just were a little bit out of sync, I think, with as many lineup changes as they rolled out in this one.
Yeah, great point. And with Ramirez, we talked about it last week, going up against Crystal Palace, a championship side. Ramirez was physically dominant in that match.
Yep.
And, just more credit. Kirsten Kasperai and Alex Greenwood is in the middle there as a center back. Even for a physical specimen like Ramirez, Alex Greenwood is a World Cup player. She is a contributor to the Lionesses. You're not just going to push her around, even somebody as strong as Ramirez. So to have like a real international level defender back there to be able to at least get Ramirez off her spots some of the time is just massively helpful. So I think you're totally right. Alexandri, great defensive game. Greenwood, I really liked, and Kasperai as well. Not to belabor it, but you did talk about, obviously, Joanna Ritting-Kanerud, JRK. If we want to use that, I think she's more than worthy of the initials treatment. I think at this point.
Yeah, approved. Let's go.
So she comes on in the 63rd minute, and I'm going to give some statistics here from our pals over at FOTMOB, FOTMOB. They have an app, they have a website. You can get all kinds of great match data, table data from leagues, injury news, all kinds of good stuff from that website. And they're bronze supporters, from what I understand. So that's pretty rad. In the second half alone, Chelsea had 10 shots. They had 3 on target, and they had 238 accurate passes and 6 corner kicks. Needless to say, it was a lot of Chelsea possession in the second half of that match. And I don't think it was a coincidence that JRK came on the 63rd, but so did Agnes Beaver-Jones, ABJ, if you like. Also good enough to get the initials treatment, if you ask me. And so they came on for Wrighton and Kirby. And this is an extremely pro-Guro Wrighton podcast, but I think you're right. This wasn't really her match. So ABJ and JRK come on. And that, again, as a guy rooting for City, I was like, I don't love that. Like this one's probably going to get harder as it goes. Was the difference evident to you when those fresh legs and great talent came on?
100%. Talked about Kanerud. Again, she's just so creative and she's so fast twitch, she's just like pop, 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 and could put the ball anywhere she wants it. which is kind of what you need when you got Ramirez just kind of roaming around the 18, trying to make something happen. I also thought Aggie looked super live too.
Hell yeah.
She came in and she was just a jolt of energy for that Chelsea attack. But again, shout out to City and especially that back line in Hasegawa. They were up for the challenge despite having to take on, those 4 fresh legs coming into the game. I can't imagine what it was like, as a City fan and follower to kind of sweat out that last half an hour. But zooming out a little bit, which I love to do, this Chelsea side looking a little vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned, Bunny Shaw, obviously, Jessica Park, big impact on the game. But I also want to give a shout out to Chloe Kelly, who gave Niamh Charles all she can handle in this one. I mean, I think looking at it and trying to project forward into the Champions League and thinking about, okay, what are these other attacks going to look like? How's Chelsea going to be able to hold up against them? All of a sudden, we'll get into the next match a little bit later, but all of a sudden, these Champions League front runners, we talked Lyon PSG last week.
Mm-hmm.
We're not quite at wobble stage yet, but half an eyebrow is just raised just a little 10 or 15 degrees looking at these results and projecting forward what we might be looking at as a Champions League marches toward the final.
I think it's a great point. Yeah, we'll talk more about those favorites. But, so these leagues getting into the dog days, played a lot of football coming up into this time, with the extra games for the Champions League, with the cup ties, all that stuff. I think you're onto something here. Some of the teams that looked like giants early might be some tricky spots for them. So I mentioned in regard to this match, Chelsea dominated possession. It was about 70-30 in the second half. Just to give a little more on Keating, I mean, I think the things that jump out to me, obviously you point out every time we talk about her, she's 19 years old. And I'll say too, I mean, we are Mary Earps appreciators on this podcast. I do believe Mary Earps is the best goalkeeper in the world. But between Mary Earps, Kiera Keating, and Hannah Hampton, we got an embarrassment of riches of goalkeepers over there in jolly old England.
Mm-hmm. Future looks bright.
I would say, and Keating was up for it. I mean, I just think the things that impressed me with her being so young, she's really instinctive on the timing of her dives. And then you combine that with just her phenomenal leaping ability.
Yep.
She is diving and she's covering yards with those dives. And she's just excellent to watch. So getting back to me being a big scaredy cat again, last 15 minutes of regular time and all, like, it felt like 100 minutes of stoppage time. I believe it was 9 minutes of stoppage time, if my notes are correct here. I was shaking while I was typing, so totally scared. So maybe it was 8 or 7, and I just hit the 9 by accident. But I mean, Chelsea had City completely pinned back, and it was an all-out assault. And I always think this about great teams: when you get clearances, you have to hold the ball. You're not going to be able to do it every time, but sometimes you have to be able to get a clearance and then get the ball all the way to the other side of the pitch.
Right.
It's very natural to get a clearance and it goes right to the back holding defender or maybe the goalkeeper, and then they play it up and the attacking team gets another shot. That's fine. But once you have 3 of those in a row, 4 of those in a row, 5 of those in a row, now the levees are going to break. Like you just have to get some room. It didn't feel like we had a lot of those in the last 20 plus minutes of the match. I thought for sure in the 76th minute, Cuthbert was going to score and redeem herself, because that's the exact kind of Aaron Cuthbert shit that would happen and that we've seen in these Champions League matches. Mm-hmm. So Niamh Charles, who you mentioned earlier, and I'll say Chloe Kelly is going to give any defender everything they can handle because she is just fast as fuck. But I say it about Niamh Charles. I feel like every time we talk about her, she is at least good in every match that she plays in. Like sometimes she goes in and you're like, wow, excellent Niamh Charles game. I can't think of a lot of matches where I'm like, bad Niamh Charles game. Like she is just like, she's either real steady or like bordering on excellent. So Niamh Charles, she plays a long pass, crossfield, hits it to Ritin Kanerud, who then draws both Leah Wahabi and Laura Coombs near the end line. Does exactly JRK kind of shit. Gets the 2 defenders to come in toward the end line, and she just lays the ball back to Aaron Cuthbert around 16 yards out. And I'm just like, oh, okay, this one's ended in a draw. And the Scotty, she drills it and barely misses the target. It was another opportunity where she misses it. If she placed it where she wanted, I think she has any keeper beat, even Keating in this ridiculous form that she's in. But you touched on something earlier that kind of sparked something for me. When your keeper is red hot like that, now you make every player who's taking the shots, they're trying to take these really concise nibbles. And they're almost more prone to miss because they're like, I got to get this exactly perfect.
Yep, trying to paint those corners.
100%. And so in those last minutes, even though they were pinned back, I liked Gareth Taylor's subs. He brought on Swedish vet Philippa Engeldahl. He brought on Mary Fowler, Alana Kennedy, Demi Stokes, kind of shore up the defense throughout the match. Our gal Bunny, the announcer mentioned it late in the match. She was from like 79 to the rest of the match. She was out on her feet. She was cooked. Mm-hmm. And, I don't blame her. The amount of work that she has to put in and the amount of just like physical play that she has to fight off while she plays. She's the target on every Chloe Kelly cross. She's the target on every corner kick we have. So she's getting beat up down there all the time. But I thought the subs held up. And, I think that was maybe part of why we couldn't hold the ball down there because Bunny was just absolutely exhausted for good reason. But they held on. And you might recall last week, your boy on this podcast said City was on for the double, and here we are.
Excellent call by you. I think you might be proven right. We'll see. We're on quite the heater as a show as well. We told you to keep an eye out for Fran Kirby coming on. Check. Kiara Keating, we gave her flowers last week. Check. Lena Oberdorf to Bayern, had that one pegged. I mean, we're just basically some combination of Shams and Woj and Zach Lowe all rolled up into one with podcast. Fucking go. Bunny, she's just unbelievable, along with Erin Cuthbert. Those are a couple of our 2023 starting 11s. She just is using her strength, her speed, every minute that she's out there. She's just always hungry, always kind of on the prowl out there. So, yeah, you can definitely understand how she would hit that point. Speaking of the heater that we're on, we also hinted at something last week having to do with those champions of everything Barcelona potentially starting to show some signs of maybe the slightest of little wobbles. Let's go ahead. I want to talk about that one.